Welcome to the riskadvisor.com podcast. I am Jim Henry and here with my good friend and co-host Sal Lafreri. Today's topic is attempting to develop a re-occupancy plan for facilities without a net. No government guidance, no compliance, no issues, no mandates. How do you apply common sense to this? Sal?
Common sense. That's the first problem. There is none. Nobody has common sense anymore, and you can't even teach it. Hopefully, we're going to go through some of these topics with our guests, but we're trying to figure out the confusion between city, state, federal level. Trying to figure out what you're supposed to do, and I love that they come out with, these are guidelines, these are recommendations, but there's nothing specific to actually guide somebody. And I think the short of this and the real, if you're going to pull up winners and losers out of this, I think the winners out of this is going to be the attorneys. The amount of lawsuits that's going to come out of this is going to be enough to choke a horse. But
well, as always, it's left, I think, to industry to find a cheaper, better path. And I think necessity being the mother of invention here has drawn some good, bright people into this program, and we're very lucky to have Ben Butchko, president of Butchko Inc., as our guest today. And just a little background on Ben: he is the president and CEO, I said, of Butchko, a leading provider of comprehensive security risk, security master planning, program management, security engineering, consulting services. He has designed security programs and systems for a wide-ranging industrial, environmental, including electric utilities, healthcare, and pharmaceutical, oil, gas, nuclear weapons, etc. Prior to starting Butchko Inc. in 2004, Ben led security engineering and risk assessment for ExxonMobil worldwide. His project and assessment experience include on-site efforts on every continent except Antarctica, much of it extremely remote and hazardous locations. Ben has a bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering from Texas A&M University, and he is a regular presenter on security assessment, strategic planning, project management, design, and development. So, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Excited to be here, and you certainly make me sound important. It's nice. I can just sit back and listen to you talk all day.
So why didn't you not go to Antarctica? That's didn't want to rub noses with polar bear, or was...
I actually had the opportunity. I was at the southern tip of South America, and it was I could take a Russian trawler for an 8-day venture to get there, step onto the ice and freeze my tail off, and then take 8 days back. And I thought there were lots of better things that I could find to entertain myself than that.
Well, coming up with solutions for reopening after COVID, that may be easy compared to that trek down there. But nonetheless, bright minds like yourselves are migrating to this and trying to help provide some guidance in all the chaos that's out there. So, the bottom line is facilities need to reopen, but under what direction? Federal, state, local, etc. Can you elaborate on what you're seeing here and how you're assessing this situation?
Sure. Well, and there's really a couple of reasons why we're interested, and from what we've seen, some are personal and others are nationalistic, and others are working with our existing clients. And one is, as a country, we can't keep pretending like we have economy that's running on all cylinders when we're not. And as a family, and wanting to make sure that my kids are able to go to school, that there's job prospects, and we can continue to operate. That's great. You need to have something there. And then third is, when this thing hit, our clients, most of them, they just retracted back. stop all travel, all external expenses. We saw our income dwindle dramatically because everyone was trying to hold on to cash. So, how could we help the companies that we know, work with, and they're struggling to keep their own businesses alive, and from an altruistic standpoint as well as just narcissistic of, if our customers are not in business, they're not our customers anymore, or anybody else. So folks are trying to run on quicksand, and they're not sure if they're sinking or if they're making progress, but they're sure spending a lot of energy.
So we certainly saw, from the early stages, mostly from the states, an attempt to stop with the one size fits all ruling for just shut everything down everywhere. And now, in the reverse, the openings are also getting somewhat specific to industries and what have you. That's what you're seeing, is this program's really got to be very much site specific in how you approach the reopening plan?
It really does. There are, you can establish templates company wide and business wide that are common across businesses. But I mean, even if you look and we've got, I was running through the Colorado regs just today and yesterday. Well, those regulations, we're on the round number 8 of the executive order defining what are the requirements for their Safer at Home program. And so we're on iteration 8, and then there are separate iterations by business, by industry and facility type. And so all of this whole matrix of options that are continually changing, and nobody's got a crystal ball as to what's really going to be next. Folks have what they hope to be next. And so that backdrop is, it's really straining companies to plan as a corporate level as well as plan at the individual level, because half of what's required, it varies by state, but you've got a half or more requirements that are corporate level and a half or more requirements that are individual site level. So you have to look at it from both ways.
I've been saying all along, one of the biggest problems with this is that, we're basically trying to secure a ghost. Normally, in the security world, you have doors that need to be locked, windows that need to be protected, a perimeter that needs to be established. You have all of those things that you can set up and do. And in this, we really have no idea what we're trying to prevent, where the real threat is coming from. When you look at what came out originally, with respect to persistence of it, how persistent is it, and how volatile it's become when it's sitting on a table, and is it 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 days, 14 days. There's just no clear direction of what you're dealing with, and it's something that I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have. And then you put on top of that, not even government regulation. It would probably be a lot easier if we had government regulations that came down. Whether they were stupid or not is immaterial, just if we had clear-cut direction. But you got this, we think this might work, or here's a good suggestion. And then you find out that, later on it's not.
Which is obviously true. And then those decisions are made on a combination of truth, fact, and statistics. And many times those three don't match. And they can all, and no one, if you look at, everyone says, well, follow the data. But when the data is not reliable and it's been manipulated either out of ignorance, apathy, or some other agenda attempt, and that varies by jurisdiction. So you can't, at a national level and at a state level even, you can't look at the data you have and get consistent information from which to work. So Yeah,
Yeah.
it's certainly, it isn't an easy job for the folks leading the charge government wise, and that makes it even harder for the folks leading the charge in industry.
Coming out of my last assignment in the department, I was assigned to the Office of Emergency Management, and one of the things that I learned in there was that in the normal course of a crisis, you have the event that happens that creates the crisis. You have the response to the crisis, and you get everybody ramps up in response to the crisis. Then you get the mitigation attempts that start to try and mitigate everything that happened and the fallout from what happened. And then ultimately you get into the political response. And that's where all the hijinks start because, the first maybe 48, depending on the size of the event, the first 48 to 72 hours is probably the truest of everything. And then you start getting into the political response of, you should have been doing this. We should have known that. This is what should be being done. This is the money that we need. You look at what's happening with COVID, right? I mean, with the hospitals. It's incredible. I swear to God, there's got to be a couple of potholes that are being written off to COVID. It's just everything because the feds are going to pay. And, it's just those type of things that become really problematic.
Well, as if this isn't, already the perfect storm. One cliche I think is so true is where there's chaos, there's opportunity. So in addition to all of this other, fog that's out there and confusion and data that doesn't line up, you've got opportunists that are coming out here trying to come up with snake oil that, do this, do that.
No good crisis goes to waste.
No good crisis goes to waste. So I imagine that's something else that has motivated you and your team to try and bring some clarity to this because of all the vaporware from companies that are either dusting off other platforms that didn't work in another environment and they're trying to repatriate them, or something that's completely, homegrown in the last few weeks and unvetted.
Oh, absolutely. And that, when we started the STEPS program, and when we started this generally looking at things, one of the big issues was, and that's where the train was starting, and I'll pick on thermal imagers just because that's one. But pick a widget, any of the widgets that are being sold. Some of them are software widgets, some of them are hardware widgets. And so these things are flooding the market, and we're getting calls of confusion of, should I buy this or not? And people are actually buying equipment. And then we're saying, well, okay, that's great. You've bought this wonderful widget that's going to solve all your problems, and you've spent a bunch of money on it, or you think you're planning on spending it. But then you have to figure out, how do I use it? And then if I use it, am I setting myself up for greater liability? This is a health crisis. Am I now all of a sudden, I used to be in the oil and gas business, or I used to be in the hotel business. Well, now all of a sudden I have to worry about HIPAA requirements, and I've got ADA requirements that have nothing to do with people coming, getting through a doorway or a hallway or finding a bathroom stall that they can, or a sink that they can work with. Now I've got ADA issues that are related to health and health data. And so that one little widget all of a sudden blows up into, oh my gosh, I'm afraid to install it. Or if I install it wrong, my general counsel is already breathing down my neck, and the HR folks are saying, you can't do this, or we aren't sure. And so that mire of lack of understanding and lack of clarity, and as Sal, you mentioned, when I was living in Houston, Texas, we would talk about there are more attorneys in Harris County, which encompasses Houston, than there are in the whole country of Japan. So what are you going to do? Do you protect your people? Absolutely. Do you protect your business? You better. And so you're legally required to protect your business and your shareholders. But yet when those two come in conflict because there's too many unknowns, what do you do? And you can't just buy a widget that's a panacea. And so many of these widget manufacturers and widgets that you see out on the out in the market now, one of the questions that we like to tout is, when you start vetting those, you say, well, one, were you in business 4 months ago? And if you were in business 4 months ago, were you selling this product or anything like it 4 months ago? Yeah, it's really great that you used to have the ice cream shop down the corner, and now all of a sudden you are the software data aggregation, temperature management and measuring, and the PPE supplier to the world.
Yeah, we could probably go on for days about that. I mean, we've been banging pretty hard on vaporware, is what we've been calling it, but
We'll have to call it widgetware now.
widgetware. Well, I'll change the name of it. We want to get into logistics, but before we do that, we just want to remind everybody that you're listening to the Risk Advisor podcast, hosted by Jim Henry and myself, Sal Lafreri. We're going to invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe and follow us on our social media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So, Ben, we want to talk a little bit about logistics. But before the show, we were talking about shutting down, how that damages your finances, and putting people out of work and people trying to take care of their money. Are the results, when you go through all of this, are the results practical? Are they achievable, or even is it affordable when you get into these logistics?
The short answer is, if you're creative and you just apply a basic sanity and red face test before you go out and spend a whole bunch of money, it can be affordable and practical and achievable. But it's that's the hardest thing, and it's not just limited to this COVID situation. And Sal, you were talking about some of your history of dealing with a crisis. It's that same mental step back, ask the hard but simple questions first before you jump off the cliff. You can get there. But the logistics of, let's take a high rise business. What's been the driving business means for property management? Has been get as many people into as tight a space as possible and monetize that so that we can keep the costs down for office space. And now we have a crisis that says, well, our whole purpose is to keep where there's only a few people in an area and keep them separate and don't let them touch or see each other. Then that whole model is completely unavailable. So you have to then start looking at, like we do with one of the customers that we've had long term, their office building, which is over 40 stories tall, they only have 8% occupancy right now. They have floors they're not even using, and they don't expect to ever fill that building up again until this entire crisis is over.
We're seeing the same thing here.
Yeah. And so so the logistics are really how we built, and I'll say Butchco in conjunction with ESI Convergent, we collectively came together with a STEPS program that is, and a lot of that, and we had that, we still have it available. We work with it at stepsbacktowork.com, freely available, provides an overall strategy that allows you to come up with something practical, and looking at when I look at my business and I look at how to bring my business back to work, it's and steps they're pretty simple. What's my S for social distancing policy? What, T for testing? What are the testing guidelines for both staff and visitors? And how do we manage that? Entry assessment program. Can we get people into our building? We talked to one, and based on one company, their high rise, in order to meet the regs, it was going to take them 11 and a half hours to get everybody into the building. Well, that's somewhat of a challenge when you have an environment with an 8-hour workday. Some people, and that assumes that they go up and they never leave to go to go eat lunch or meet with anybody else.
Yeah.
And some people like to sleep and eat. That's one of my habits is I do like to sleep indoors. I like to eat on a regular basis, and unless it's really hot, I like to wear more than just a pair of shorts when I'm out, when I'm outside.
So you're living a spoiled life. Okay.
Yeah. It's, we got all these first world problems. They're really awesome.
So it sounds like since in the STEPS program, the heart and soul of it, since we know there's no widgets out there to magically enable us to go back to business the way that it was, is in policies, procedures, and handling personnel issues. For that program, as well as and the assessment process, to be able to come up with a plan is rooted in that.
Absolutely. We're going to be living in a hybrid world. And that hybrid world, some folks are going to be working on site, some folks are not. And how do you manage that? So the STEPS program provides all that strategic guidance, how the programmatically, what would you do to address your business? And then the entry assessment program, that's where you get into the details at the facility level that say, okay, facility level, our challenge is we have a normal staff of 1,000 people and 200 visitors a day. And as we start phasing up through opening back up, we may only have 10% of our people in right now. We may only project we're ever going to get to 50 or 75% before this thing is all over. But is that practical? Because I still have to keep code compliance. I still, although the federal government and regulators are at the state level are not enforcing all regulations right now. They add new ones. But, so what maybe I can get away with now under the auspices of COVID, which is acceptable and either formally or informally from regulation, it's what can I do now that allows me to operate, that ties in all of those soft issues of making sure that, one, I keep my people safe, they believe they're safe, the policy and the procedure and the process that's applied are ones that are maintainable over time, and that if I need supplies, I can expect that I can get those supplies over time. And that's where that entry assessment is really focused at that site level to give you solutions that some of them are stupid simple that you can implement today. And if you go to your local 7-Eleven or Stop and Rob or other shop, folks, you can see the creativity in restaurants that people are putting in place, that some of them are really inexpensive. You may not want to keep them around for 6 months. You may want something that's more business polished, but there's certain things that you can, with that assessment, that you can come up with. What is the triage need today? And then what are long-term things to where if this thing runs on or we get repeat performances in the future, we have more infrastructure available to adapt.
So,
And that's what comes out of that entry assessment program. Those are the goals.
so your background and your team's background are regular security assessments, and what you're describing here for these assessments, these elements have a lot more cultural, logistics, supply chain issues, and what have you. Does your background, with the security assessments, did that really help with the foundation and understanding of the sites of some of these customers in order to kind of look much broader at all of the elements of what the assessments for reopening require? And to what degree is there a tug of war here between the security concerns and trying to maintain some level of flow there for reopening?
Oh, the reality is the approach that we've always taken for security assessments have always been a holistic business operations assessment looking at security issues. And and we've had to do that. And like I said, I've done these assessments in every continent except Antarctica. So what works in Houston, New York, Chicago, California, St. Louis, or Florida, in your more populated areas, those kind of solutions are going to be very different when you put that into an area in Colombia where you are, in order to get technical support for anything that's at the earliest you could get to that site by the time you jump on a commercial plane, jump on a private plane, then start using a chartered ground service, you're 24 to 48 hours away. And your population base, if you get people that are operating your systems and your processes with more than a second grade education and in a language that they're not used to working with and you're not used to working with, we've had to look at those around the globe all the time. And that supply chain issue of how do I get the training and the knowledge and the equipment and the support resources in, fortunately, that's something that I've been working for 15, 20 or more years. So we've learned that by not just focusing on intrusion detection systems and not just looking at access control or an intercom system. We looked at how do they work with how the building operates, what the business sense, and one of the best, I got some of the best feedback from an assessment that I performed, and I was talking with the head of the security force, and this lady was in charge of revamping all the procedures going into a chemical plant and petroleum refinery. And I asked her what business she was in. She goes, "Well, I'm in the guard service business." And within 5 minutes we talked through, and I said, if all you'll do is think you are in the business of turning nasty brown stuff into money, that's what this refinery and chemical plant does. And when you think in that context, you'll figure out which priorities you need to apply to all of your procedures and where you need to have your people get better training. I came back a month later and she no longer was struggling, had her game plan mapped out, and that context is what we take into the assessments on top of what we've learned related to code and capacity issues for revolving doors and how many people you can safely put into a stairway and how and all these other really security specific issues. Since we've already worked in a bigger context, and I used to do logistics management systems, those were exactly the same as what your security systems do, but that was all supply chain. Because we were designing systems to build and move nuclear weapons, and then it was how do you get dairy deliveries across the country, all those kinds of things we're leveraging. So I would say yes, what we've put into our secret sauce of the automated calculations and the automated processes, that a lot of that is security focused. But the way we approach the problems is, we're addressing, I'm an engineer twice over. I didn't get it right the first time, so they sent me back for another degree. The same way, how do you ask the right questions?
Right.
And fortunately, I've had folks a lot smarter than me try to teach this, this Aggie twice over, how to ask those same questions that business and operations leaders know to ask, but ask them within a context of getting people in and out of their building.
Well, you've really teed up the third segment then on solutions. We've learned in the first section we discussed, you need a holistic understanding and a view of the problem. You need a holistic understanding of all the logistics that are engaged, and recognizing, again, there's no magic widgets here, so it's really a mixture of processes and people and what have you. So we get to the third session here, the third segment, we will get to some specific solutions and processes for solutions. But I would remind everybody that you are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast, hosted by myself, Jim Henry, and Sal LaFreri. We invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe and follow us on our social media like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So, on to segment 3. Sal, you want to kick that off?
Sure. Let's get into something about solutions a little bit more, specific to what the listeners are probably going to be asking, and that is, so how can I perform an assessment safely and cost effectively? And I think it probably should be reversed. Probably, how do I do it more cost effectively than safely? But you get the idea. You get the question.
Well, that's the challenge. You need to figure out how to open your facility before it's open. You need to figure out how to get your staff and customers in before it's open, not afterwards, because it takes a little bit of time, one, to figure it out and then get things in place. So that was a challenge that when we started with the STEPS program and really started burrowing in on the tactics of the entry assessment program, is that we needed to be able to perform these assessments remotely. And so fortunately, we are able, with technology is allowing us to do that. Like I said, we got creative. So what we do is that when we engage with an assessment, we perform the assessments from start to finish, 2 to 7 days. Depends on the complexity of the facility, and that relates to the cost. And the cost, we wanted the cost to be cheap, because like I said, if our customers and business in general isn't open, then we don't have a business either, because we are a service provider. So, our assessments, they're running from $3,500 to $20,000 start to finish, 2 to 7 days, all performed remotely. And what we do is we use 3-dimensional visual imagery. So if we go direct to an end customer, we send them a camera. We online teach them in 30 to 45 minutes how to take the images they need, so that we can actually walk through their facility in 3-dimensional view, like a lot of folks are doing when they're touring houses in the real estate market. Well, we use a product that we use and resell called Visual Plan, and so we can take measurements. We can get the visual entity of orientation with these facilities without ever setting foot on the site. We use online surveys, that kind of the Survey Monkey concept, where it's also like writing your own story. is depending on the questions that how you answer questions, then it then goes to the following questions that apply. If the questions don't apply, they're not even presented. So the things that we can't capture visually of how the buildings work, how many people you need, what are you already, what are your needs? We handle those remotely. Then with a couple of telephone calls, we can run calculations of how fast and how many people can you get into facilities, what are the pathways you need to send them in and out, and what's practical, what's not, and still meeting code and meeting the biggest challenges. How do you meet the always changing city regulations, state regulations, county regulations? Those are legal requirements. Sometimes they're guidelines, but then you have the federal guidelines that are in play. And then, oh, by the way, if you are part of an industry association, you may have industry guidelines that there's an expectation you'll follow, or you set yourself up for liability. So in the background, we're tracking all of that mess and trying to keep, and then align that with your facility. And then when we send back the results, we provide not only a report, which is classic because we're a consultant. So what do we want to do? We want to make sure that you're almost really happy. Because if you're super happy, you don't need us anymore. But we solve your problem, and then we want to send you an invoice because it's hobbies are nice, but they don't pay the mortgage. But we want to do it reasonably. We want to make sure that it's equitable, and then our goal is we embed the recommendations that are visual. We put that in that same virtual tour that we use to assess. Now you can walk through your own facility and see where we've put in upgrades in that facility. And we try and give upgrades that you can accommodate within a week, and then others that you may be able to accommodate within a month, and then some that are going to be longer term. But our goal is how close can we get you? And hopefully we've completely met the requirements that are applicable, that are achievable within a 30-day time frame of the time we start, that you can have your facility up and running somewhere in that 2 to 4 weeks time frame. You can start bringing people back in and not be hanging out on a liability limb and a safety limb, and you've got a story to tell your staff and visitors that we're protecting you. It's safe to be back, and if you do these things a smart way, we can all be successful.
So some end users have some long-term relationships with systems integrators that are maintaining some of the security access control solutions and whatnot. I have a pretty good understanding of the domain knowledge of the site and processes and whatnot. So I imagine that in some cases, integrators can be a catalyst to helping to collect and provide that information back to you to accelerate, the effectiveness and the speed of the assessment.
Well, Jim, we feel like the combination for us, for the integrators, and for the end customer is really almost a self-licking ice cream cone, because it benefits everybody. What happens is, and we partner with integrators, and the nice thing is, as you stated, Jim, the integrators know a lot about that operation. They know the facility. They already have that relationship there. So from the customer standpoint, the whole process gets streamlined because the integrator can come in and take the 360 degree images efficiently. They already, and with higher reliability because they practiced it before. They can also pre-answer some of the questions that we have in our smart surveys. So there's less of a burden on the customer to answer those. And then there's less time lag because when the results come out and the recommendations, those integrators are already in a position to say, we're postured already to help you with if it's equipment put in or training or reconfiguration of some of the tools they have. They're much more efficient and can accelerate that process of getting all the pieces in that you need. So from the customer standpoint, it's really, and we're finding more customers prefer that model than direct with us because of that streamlining. They're already busy pulling their hair out trying to keep their business alive. So the closer they can get to an easy button, the better.
And for the integrators, the knowledge that you bring in with regard to the code compliance that you need to be following and whatnot, that's something that generally is not a core focus of what the integrator's role is. So you're each contributing your strengths, which again should get that customer to that almost happy point.
Which is near and dear to Jim's heart, being an integrator.
Absolutely. And even if, and the other piece, for the integrator, this is another way for the integrator to be touching that customer and showing their value to the customer without trying to sell them the sexiest thing in the world. It's a means to maintain that communication for the integrator, to provide an additional valued service, and to make it go faster. So, I really believe that fosters additional trust between the customers and the integrators. And that right there, I'm used to as a consultant, we come in early in the process in a design project, and the best thing we can do at the end of the project is make sure we marry a quality integrator with the customer where there's cultural and operational compatibility, because that's the long-term marriage that needs to work. So one of our metrics of success is, did the project get deployed right? But is the project, did we set the customer up to be able to maintain the value delivered from that project over time? And we see partnering with the integrators that this is just another step for them to be able to do that. And if it means reconfiguring some things in an access control system or a visitor management system that they can do in 1 or 2 hours or a half a day versus the customer trying to relearn it over a day in the midst of everything else they're doing, I don't see a downside. And I've tried to look.
Ben, one of the things we want to do is make sure we get contact information for you and give you a chance to give us your website and a number for you. But I would want to mention that what we're going to do is in the show notes on our website, when we post, we'll have information on the STEPS program and the entry assessment. So we'll put stuff up there. But more importantly, how do the listeners get to you?
Absolutely. They're welcome to reach out, and you can go to our website, which is butchcoinc.com, BUTCHKOINC.com. They can go to they can also email me directly, bmbutchco@butchcoinc.com, as well as my phone number. And this will get to our team, 832-304-2315. And, the only thing we guarantee is we'll tell you the straight up scoop as we know it. And if we don't have an answer for you, we'll work on getting it back to you. We built our company on and I grew up as a son of a 2-star general, but honor and integrity were the basis of life. So we strive every step of the day to maintain that as a company culture. And so if we send you off track, we'll do our best to make sure we bring it back in the right right direction.
Sounds good. We appreciate that. And so you have been listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and myself, Sal LaFreri. We're going to ask you to subscribe to the show and to like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to the webpage, theriskadvisor.com, and you can set that easily up. Also, if you know someone that would make a great guest, please go to our webpage, again, at theriskadvisor.com, and make your suggestion. Remember, you can hear the show on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, and, of course, stream it at theriskadvisor.com. We'd like to, again, thank our guest for being with us this evening, and we want to thank you for listening, and we hope that you tune in next week.
theriskadvisor.com